Hey guys, hey everyone. Thanks for sticking around on a Friday 8 p.m. And very happy to grab a beer with any of you guys after if you have questions. But I'm going to talk about mapping out the DAO and tooling ecosystem, which I think is evolving extremely rapidly. Given the recent explosion and in the narrative of DAOs. There's a really interesting concept, by USV, I think, put out an article in 2018 talking about the application layer pulling the infrastructure layer alongside with it. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing in the DAO world, right? So we're seeing this explosive demand in different use cases and different different types of DAOs evolving over the last 6 months to a year, really pushing infrastructure development and really pushing experimentation at the infrastructure layer. So again, this article that USV wrote in 2018, I want to say, it was called The Myth of the Infrastructure Phase, where they essentially argue that it's not that the infrastructure gets built first and then all the applications get built on top of it. It's usually the use cases that evolve initially, and then they pull infrastructure with it because of a dire necessity for those tools to be built. So I think we're kind of seeing the same thing. We've seen this happen in other crypto niches and experiments and stuff. But it seems to me that apps and infrastructure in the DAO world are evolving in responsive cycles, not distinct, completely separate phases. So anyway, I think I'm going to skip these images. So why is it interesting to actually talk about DAOs and infrastructure? Primarily because by actually understanding how to qualify and how to categorize these different tools, it'll be easier for newer members of DAO builders in the ecosystem to actually use and leverage tools. And the standardization of information and how we actually convey these mechanisms, I think it's going to be pretty important to actually onboard future builders. So anyway, keeping it casual. Again, this explosive demand is really just driving this infrastructure development. And when we talk about infrastructure in the tech stack, we're pretty much the way Boardroom is seeing it is these different five different categories. The first one is just general frameworks, governance frameworks, which I'm sure all of you are very familiar with. Again, these are very, very diverse, dependent on DAO types and DAO use cases, right? You see everything from DeFi blue chips using Compound Bravo and Alpha, to Snapshot being used for more, lightweight DAO governance implementations and processes. But this is really where you get a massive, massive spectrum, right? Of different use cases leveraging different lightweight or very, very on-chain security heavy frameworks, depending on what goal they're trying to achieve. On top of that, we're also seeing this evolution. I didn't really know where to categorize all these interesting platforms and UX, and this is where I want to keep it super open. And if you guys want to interrupt me and add projects and stuff, shout out, because I'm sure all these projects are actually here today or somewhere. So, but again, the controllers, I'm categorizing them as platforms that are specifically tailored to a single governance framework, right? So DAO House is helping users and DAO builders build DAOs on top of Moloch. Alchemy is doing the same for DAO Stack. And there's a number of other evolutions evolving around these frameworks built on top of a specific primitive. On top of that, and very adjacent, but very fascinating, you get all the treasury, tooling and stuff that's being developed as well. Obviously, Gnosis Safe is a very core primitive for a lot of DAOs today, but also these aggregator upper layers like Parcel and Llama being building really interesting tooling at the aggregation layer as well. And something that's also really fascinating, I think it's the allocation of work and reputation, right, alongside these DAOs too. So how do you actually qualify reputation, contributions, to objectively try to measure all these things when so much of the work is subjective, right? And so much of the information that has to be decided on how to actually tier, social reputation within a community, et cetera, is really so subjectively measured. So all these, tooling providers are trying to fix that in really fascinating ways. And then finally on top, the aggregators. That's where Boardroom really fits into all of this, right? And we're really just trying to create this glue between all these different tools and contextualize, how we access this data, how we index this information, and how we actually build, culture and context around some of these more objective tools and open source primitives. So again, something really interesting I think to remember is that, these entities all these open source primitives, they're just tools, right? They're not going to solve your very like human coordination issues, right? Or like human problems or relationship issues. And a lot of the measurement that we need to do is so subjective that we can't completely forget about like this very human dynamic, right? Stakeholder theory has been around for like 30 years. That's not going to disappear overnight. And I think that's something interesting to remember, which is why, at Boardroom, we're kind of seeing that a lot of this, infrastructure and tooling is going to get super commoditized as standards start to develop around different use cases and different frameworks. So what we're going to see is that as all of these tools become more and more complex, but more standardized across different use cases for DAOs, culture and context built on top of the DAO is going to become ever more important, right? To actually differentiate yourself. And that, I think a lot of that is really, really subjective and requires just like a lot of like community building and basic, tools that aren't just provided by like a contract code, right? Or like rules and processes established on chain. So anyway, so that's like where Boardroom is also trying to play a bit into this game, right? So we completely understand that like all of these frameworks are going to dramatically evolve. These categories aren't going to hold for the next like year or two. Absolutely not. But I think just providing like some very general categories helps us contextualize how to even put these governance Lego blocks together, right? In the first place for a DAO to achieve their own goals. So Boardroom specifically is building a platform that just simplifies like these DAO interactions between all these frameworks. The governance SDK is a portable, protocol agnostic interop framework that acts as almost as a proxy between all these different frameworks and all these different governance tools, and allows developers to just query and interact with all these tools that we literally just discussed as well, no matter how they evolve. It's a very flexible framework. So as new ones come into the market, we can also use them. The Boardroom API sits on top of that, and then essentially continually just indexes and aggregates governance information across all these frameworks in a simplified, standard, uniform manner. So if I need to know if voter XYZ interacted with 5 different DAOs across 5 different frameworks using Bravo and Snapshot and Moloch and Aragon, I can actually see all of that data in a normalized fashion, right, across all of the DAOs in the ecosystem. I can compare hundreds of different DAOs across tens of different frameworks, and I can see DAO-to-DAO interactions, right? I could, for example, explore how the index co-op votes on meta-governance proposals on Compound that uses Bravo or Aave v2. And on top of that, we built like a reference product, right, which is the dashboard, which most people are familiar with when it comes to Boardroom. And this dashboard is really, an easy-to-use interface to engage in global governance and management. It's kind of like a social network global aggregator for DAOs. And we have some really interesting management tools that we built alongside the folks at Ceramic that just presented earlier around forum discussions, voting, et cetera, even treasury management. So all along that stack that was discussed before. And also global views, the entire DAO ecosystem mapped in a single place. All of your previous vote history, no matter what governance framework you were interacting with, in one single place. So really kind of contextualizing all these different tools in a bit of a more abstracted level. And right now we've integrated with 55 protocols across 4 different frameworks, and we're continuously just adding more projects. So we want to talk to all the DAO builders. We want to talk to all the different DAO service providers, developers, et cetera, to onboard onto the SDK, see how you guys can leverage Boardroom as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll be bouncing around the venue if you guys have any questions, or if you want to come up and ask now. But feel free to join our Discord in the meantime. Thanks, guys.